This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is a beloved, multi-award winning actress, director, writer, producer, editor, and humanitarian who's been dazzling audiences both in front of and behind the camera in a monumental career spanning almost 7 decades. She's the first woman ever to be nominated for Academy Awards both as an actress and a filmmaker. She received her first Academy Award nomination for her wonderful performance as Alice in Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, for which she also received 2 Golden Globe Award nominations for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical and Most Promising Female Newcomer. And she won the New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Supporting Actress. Her second Oscar nomination was in the category of Best Live Action Short for her film Number One, which she wrote, directed, produced, edited, and scored. The New York Times commended the film as one of the best movies ever made concerning child development. Her third Oscar nomination was for Best Supporting Actress for her performance as Julia Farnsworth opposite Warren Beatty in Heaven Can Wait, for which she won a Golden Globe Award and a Saturn Award. She received another Golden Globe Best Actress nomination for her performance in Such Good Friends. She also wrote, directed, and starred in the highly acclaimed and intensely personal film The End of Innocence, and she's appeared in many other great movies, including Revenge of the Pink Panther, The Anderson Tapes, The Love Machine, The Last of Sheila, Honeysuckle Rose, Death Trap, Author, Caddyshack 2, Out to Sea, Boynton Beach Club, and many more. On television, we all remember her as the intelligent and classy Whipper Cohn on the hit TV show Ally McBeal, and as the vivacious and free-spirited Honey Bernstein Flynn on the popular sitcom Three Sisters. She's also guest starred in dozens of classic TV shows, including Have Gun Will Travel, The Untouchables, 77 Sunset Strip, Gunsmoke, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, Beverly Hills 90210, Diagnosis Murder, and many more. And she's co-starred in numerous terrific TV movies and miniseries, including Virginia Hill, Lady of the House, Having It All, Master of the Game, Jenny's War, Christmas in Connecticut, and My Mother the Spy, to name only a few. In 2011, our guest released her riveting and highly compelling best-selling memoir, Dear Cary, which chronicled her incredibly intense and turbulent relationship with her husband, Carrie Grant. The book was so tremendously successful that it was on the New York Times bestseller list 3 different times over a period of 4 years. And in 2023, our guest was the executive producer of the highly acclaimed miniseries about Carrie Grant called Archie. She also has a podcast called God's Table. And if all of that weren't enough, our guest is renowned for her humanitarianism, especially in the areas of child welfare, as national spokesperson for the Hemangioma Treatment Foundation, and for Operation Lookout, which is dedicated to finding kidnapped children. And she's worked with Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America, as well as many other organizations advocating for animal welfare, substance abuse rehabilitation, and California's Special Olympics for physically and mentally challenged athletes. And last but certainly not least, in 1983, our guest received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I'm delighted and deeply honored to welcome the incomparable Dyan Cannon to our show. Dyan, thank you so much for being here.
You are so kind and so generous. Thank you, Harvey.
I want to start, Dyan, by congratulating you on your Hollywood Beauty Award, which you just received. And I got to tell you, I was very touched by your acceptance speech. You said that when you look at the world, you've tried your whole life to see the stars, not the mud that people keep throwing at each other. That was a very profound statement, Dyan.
You know, I can't take really credit for that. I don't remember the name of the man. Thank you, Harvey, who said it. But the complete saying was, 2 men look out through the same bars. One sees the mud, one sees the stars. And so I have been practicing trying to see the stars in spite of all the mud that the world keeps throwing at each other, you know?
Well, while we're on the topic of beauty, I know you've lived your whole life understanding that real beauty applies to the heart and the soul and the spirit, not just the physical aspect. But let me ask you for a moment about physical beauty. I think we all know what the advantages are of being physically beautiful, but are there any disadvantages of being beautiful?
Oh, well, I wouldn't know about that. I honestly have never, ever thought of myself as beautiful. And I'm always flattered and surprised when other people do. But you know, I made this a part of the speech. The Hollywood Beauty Organization, only because you brought it up, presented me with the award of timeless beauty. And I'm a wordsmith, Harvey. I love words. So I have many dictionaries here, including one from 1873, which is the original Webster's Dictionary. And I look up all words. I looked up timeless, which means to be devoid of time. And I looked up beauty. And I couldn't believe what the definition of beauty was. And I looked at it again and I thought, is that right? It means an assembly of graces, and that grace comes from God, and that the assembly of graces would include joy, laughter, compassion. So I said to the entire crowd that was there that night, and it was a beautiful gala, really a gorgeous evening. I said, I guess that means we all have timeless beauty, all of us, if we're living with those assembly of graces, right? So that to me is what the definition of beauty is.
Well,
And
you certainly exemplify that. It makes me kind of chuckle because I know when you were starting out as an actress, you were told after your first screen test to get a nose job. Aren't you glad you had the guts to say no?
you know, I'm so blessed, Harvey. I've had like these angels around me, even in a place called Hollywood, where things are supposed to be done at a very fast pace. Yes, I did a screen test. They loved the acting. I did that for Jerry Wald at 20th Century Fox. He was the biggest producer at the time. And they said, we love your acting, but your nose doesn't photograph well. So I called my parents and told them I wanted a nose job. And they said, what is that? I said, well, they fixed your nose. They said, well, there's nothing wrong with your nose. So I said, no. Now that they've said I can't do it, I want to do it. So I called my friends and got the name of the best plastic surgeon in town. At that time, his name is Dr. Sparks. And I went to him and I walked into his office and told him what I wanted. And he said, get out of my office. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Dyan, they will not just try and change the outside of you. More importantly, they will try and change the inside of you. He said, one day someone will come in and say, I want to know this, just like Dyan Cannon. In the meantime, get out of my office. Can you imagine how I was protected? Had he been a different kind of man, he would have taken this nose and done something else with it.
It's a wonder that more movie stars didn't go to him because look at how many ruined themselves.
I've had some friends that have really been hurt by it.
Well, before we talk about your book, which moved me so deeply, I want to ask you a few questions about your amazing career. You were the female lead in the national touring company of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, choreographed by the amazing Bob Fosse. What was he like to work with?
He was an extraordinary man and an extraordinary talent. We actually dated for a while. He was complicated. And I think that part of that complication was worked out physically in his routines that he assembled for us. He was brilliant, he was fun, and I'd forgotten about that wonderful time. Thank you for reminding me. It was very special.
Well, you were offered the lead in the movie version of How to Succeed, but your husband, Carrie Grant, didn't want you to work, so you turned it down. That must have been very traumatic for you to turn down such a big role.
It was. He didn't want me to work. He wanted me to stay home with the baby. And I didn't understand it. But you know, Harvey, I think what I wanted so much to make him happy. He had had such an abused childhood, really horrific. And what I found out through all that was you really cannot make anyone happy. Happiness is an inside job. You can try and comfort, you can try and lead, you can try and guide, but you can't really change anyone. That has to be something that's from them when they're ready.
And I'm going to get into more of that in a few minutes. But first, I have to mention to you, Dyan, in 1965, you appeared on the Danny Kaye show and you sang Have I Stayed Too Long at the Fair. You really nailed it in that performance. And I've always wanted to tell you that.
Thank you. I did have a contract, a singing contract at a record company, and then things happened that didn't pan out. But I love singing, love it.
In 1971, you were directed by Otto Preminger in Such Good Friends, which was a great story written by the wonderful Elaine May. He was notorious, Mr. Preminger, for being extremely difficult to work with. How did you survive that experience?
Barely. He was a genius. He was a brilliant man who had wonderful ideas. It was the way he executed those ideas that made it difficult to work with him. So many people on the set left during the filming because it was just so, and there have been actors that have paid millions not to carry out their contract with him. But we worked it out. Somehow we worked it out, and it was not a thoroughly happy experience, unfortunately. It was, I'd never had one before it or since that was quite like that.
It's a great performance, and that stands the test of time. You've worked with some other legendary directors, Paul Mazursky and Bob and Carol, and The Pickle, Herbert Ross and The Last of Sheila, Blake Edwards, Revenge of the Pink Panther. Sidney Lumet directed you in 2 films, Death Trap and The Anderson Tapes, and you are an award-winning director. Was there one specific director, Dyan, who influenced you the most?
Oh, they all taught me lessons in so many different ways because they were all so different. Each one of them a giant, each one of them brilliant. I just feel, when I hear you talk about it, you don't think about those things on a daily basis. I have been so blessed. I've worked with so many brilliant people, talented people that have been so generous with me, with their ideas on how to make me a better actress. I can't fit. Each one is so different. And each experience so different. And I'm not just being, gracious about it. I mean it. I mean, I've learned so much from my experience with every one of these amazing people.
I was very intrigued that in 1992, when you starred in the remake of the classic Barbara Stanwyck movie, Christmas in Connecticut, you were directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. What was he like as a director?
We had great fun. I was surprised because I was really aboard on that film before Arnold was. And when I found out that he was directing, I thought, well, this is going to be fun. And it was fun.
My favorite performances of Dyan Cannon are the ones where you've played real people. For example, 1974, you played Virginia Hill, the girlfriend of Bugsy Siegel. In 1978, you portrayed Sally Stanford, who ran a bordello in Sausalito and ended up being elected the mayor of the town. How do you prepare when you're playing a real person?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't, excuse me, I was unable to meet with Virginia, but Sally Stanford I met and was able to get into her head. Isn't it interesting that she was a mayor and ran a Bordeaux? I mean,
good businesswoman.
For those of you who don't know what a Bordeaux is, it's a house of prostitution. So she was a politician and ran a house. But on the other hand, for Virginia, I just did a lot of research. Yeah.
I'm very intrigued by the intuitiveness that I sense from you, Dyan. You turned down a 4-picture deal at Universal to co-star in Bob and Carol, which got you an Oscar nomination. It led to many more great roles. So you certainly did the right thing by following your instincts. Has that been easy for you in your career to trust your intuition?
Not always, but I'm a big God girl, Harvey. And I trust when I get into a place of what I would call, if I have a lot of questions about something and I don't have a peace about it, then I don't trust it. And when I get that peace, I go with it. And sometimes it turns out to be so much different than I would have thought it would be. But I've learned that all of it's for a reason. It kind of all works together for good.
Well, you've always been very particular about the characters you've played. You seem to be drawn to playing roles that are uplifting to women. But being so selective in the roles you play must have come at quite a cost in terms of financial security. Am I right?
No kidding. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes, yes. There were times when the cupboard was bare. But, I found that being true to myself in the end run brings me more peace than all the stuff. And somehow, by the grace of God, really, I've been able to maintain equilibrium.
Equilibrium and great success and great longevity. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, Dyan, but you are widely considered to be one of the most popular guests ever to appear on the Johnny Carson show. I think you were on his show at least 15 times. He clearly adored you. Did you enjoy being on his show?
And we were great friends. We actually dated. Sometime after I'd been on his show. He was such a special man, Harvey. No wonder he was on every night and people invited him into their homes every single night. That's a big deal, That doesn't just happen. He was so special. He had a heart that was so pure. And he was a great drummer. He used to bring his drums over to my house for parties. And that man could play the blinking drums. He was really good.
Well, watching you on his show was always fun. The chemistry between you, and I didn't even know you dated, but the chemistry between you, I felt like I was watching a party that I wish I could be at, and it was very, very entertaining. Now, I must tell you, Dyan, in all seriousness, I was absolutely blown away by your book, not only because we learned so much about Carrie Grant, but more importantly, because you took us on an incredibly powerful emotional journey of self-discovery. Now, Cary died in 1986, and over the years, you were asked many times to write a book, first by Swifty Lazar, then by Jackie Onassis. You always said no because you weren't ready. What made you finally decide to write the book in 2011?
The thing I've been talking about to you, Harvey, the thing about peace, I love Jackie Onassis. Swifty was a good friend of Carrie's. And it was interesting because he wanted a lot of stuff in the book with a lot of money involved. And I just wasn't ready to do that, nor was I lent that way. It was tempting because I loved her. She was such an incredible woman. She was like, to borrow the phrase, a steel hand and a velvet glove. She was really something, but I still didn't have that peace about it. I still hadn't been healed from all of it. And when I felt that I was healed, I thought that I could write a book that was fair. I felt I could write a book that was honest, that I wouldn't have to bring in a lot of the things I didn't want to talk about, but I could talk about the things that people would identify with, because I felt the book was so much bigger than me and Carrie. It's about relationships and about growth and about how do you give up your own thought for somebody else's, and how do you help them give up theirs for you, and about the things in life that matter on a day-to-day basis. I was ready to write that. It took 6 years.
Well, the book is also about healing. It's also about parenthood. It's also about career decisions that you make. It's certainly about how to help your partner overcome the trauma that he's had without losing yourself at the same time. I found all of that very, very compelling. When you first met Cary Grant, he told you there was a part of you that was slightly untamed. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, because I kept saying no. So whatever he wanted to do and I said no to, he called that wild and untamed.
Well, you were told by Aristotle Onassis that men who have difficult relationships with their mothers carry it over to the women they love. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that in terms of Carrie, it was absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you said in the book that Cary once told you that he had turned every one of his wives into his mother, Elsie, by driving them away before they could disappear on him. What did you make of that?
Well, I think it's easier to, if you're expecting rejection and abandonment, if you're expecting that from someone and with someone, it's better for you to do it to them first so you don't have to experience that pain.
Well, one of the most shocking aspects of your book for me was learning that Cary regularly took LSD. He got you to try it a few times. You didn't like it. Why do you think he was drawn to taking a hallucinogenic drug? Was this a form of spiritual exploration for him?
I think so. I think so. The first thing Carrie said when I first met him was that he was seeking God. And I went, woohoo, I love that. That's great. Because I've been doing that all my life. We can do that together. So I think it was, I wasn't talking out of school then. He wrote a series of articles for Ladies' Home Journal about LSD. Can you imagine? And he had over 100 sessions with it. But some people react differently. I knew I shouldn't take LSD, but I did to please him, and it wasn't good for me at all.
Well, I have to tell you, Dyan, as an author, your ability to verbalize in the book exactly what you were feeling at crucial times in your life is very, very impactful on the reader. For example, you described what it was like living with Cary, who was incredibly moody, mercurial, controlling. He constantly criticized and reprimanded you. In fact, at one point, he actually referred to you as being under his jurisdiction. And you wrote that you said that in order to cope, you learned the art of disconnection, as you called it. Was that difficult?
What's difficult is loving someone, trying to please them, and then trying to be what they want you to be when it goes against your will. When it goes, if you give up yourself and make someone else happy, you've lost it. You've lost yourself and you've lost them too. That's what I was trying to do. He said that to my father. He said that I was under his jurisdiction because my dad was confronting him about the LSD use.
Well, the reason that really moved me so much and troubled me, I don't know how much you know about me, but before I started this show, I spent 26 years as a family and criminal court judge. Did you know that?
Didn't.
Well,
Oh,
the reason I mention it is because over the years, I've witnessed dozens of relationships like yours, except that yours had the extra complication of being so high profile. But I hope you feel comforted and gratified, Dyan, that your book has been immensely helpful and inspirational to so many women who've been through very similar experiences. I can tell you that firsthand.
I'm so grateful to hear that. I had so many letters that were staggering to read. I remember one that pops to mind right now about a lady that was in a wheelchair whose husband was continually beating her. And she just didn't have she didn't know where to go or how to do or how to be. And after reading my book, she left him. I mean, things like that just, and I work with presently and for the last many, many, many years, I work with kids. For the last 10 years, I've been working with recovering addicts. I had worked with girls in the beginning. Now I work with young men. And I found that the one thing that is healing to all of them, male, female, young, old, all of them, is really love. Is really love. It's love that heals, that understanding that goes with love. And that to me is, I love this work. I love it. I love it. To see how people grow and changed, and to hear some of the stories of how parents have treated their kids is staggering to me.
Well,
So
the book, in my opinion, expresses love in various ways. You learned how to love yourself. You learned how to forgive. You learned how to heal. You learned how to co-parent. All of these lessons in the book are incredibly helpful to people. As I mentioned in my introduction, you executive produced the miniseries about Carrie Grant called Archie. What did it feel like to see yourself portrayed on screen by Laurie Aikman?
What a darling girl she is. We spent months working together before she, and I thought she did such a beautiful job. Of course, nobody can be you. And so the reactions would not have been always the same. But the idea that she carried through was wonderful. And she's such a good actress and such a lovely girl. And we've remained friends.
What do you think Cary would have thought of the miniseries?
Nobody's ever asked me that. That's an interesting question, Harvey. I'm not sure.
I'm not either, because I think he would maybe not have wanted the public to know about his childhood. And yet you've allowed us to understand this man who was such an enigma so much clearer. I hope that wherever he is, that he's at peace and that he appreciates that you humanized this man. He wasn't just a beautiful movie star with talent and charm. He was a complicated, layered, complex human being who was on a quest to heal.
That's true. It's really true. And I think he was always searching. Again, I think that's the reason he took LSD. He thought it would help clear his mind of the debris that was cluttering those thoughts that he wanted to entertain.
Well, all the way through the book, I kept thinking if he could have let go of the LSD and trust that you were the best drug he could ever have had, and just allow himself to absorb your positivity, your healing aura, your love, he wouldn't have needed anything else.
I think you're right. I know that his childhood had, that wall was so thick and so tall and so wide. And I think he came to relax a little bit about it in later years. But
well, I have a feeling that your daughter, Jennifer, was an enormous healer for him. She wrote a book called Good Stuff, a reminiscence of my father, Carrie Grant. Did you like her book?
She's extraordinary. We had dinner last night. She's an extraordinarily beautiful girl with 2 grandchildren, 2 kids. And he would have loved that. He would have loved that.
I think you brought him the greatest healing he could ever have by having a daughter.
Well, people might ask, well, why did he wait so late in life? But he told me that I was the only woman that he ever trusted enough to have a child with, because it was hard for him to have a child, because then he had to look at everything that happened to him as a child. And that's when our relationship went south, really. He couldn't encompass it.
Even though having a child would have been the best way to overcome what happened to him, because this is his chance to do it right.
And he did. He was a good father. But unfortunately, we couldn't eliminate those images from his thinking during our marriage. So every time it got really, really close, he pushed it away.
Well, I've got to say, the book, which I intend to read again and again, I find it an incredibly helpful blueprint for self-determination, for forgiveness, as I mentioned. I have only one more question for you, and it's this, Dyan. Your book is such a poignant and heart-wrenching search for unconditional love, inner peace. The book ends with a beautiful letter you wrote to Cary expressing forgiveness and gratitude. So my last question to you is this: after everything you've been through, have you finally found the unconditional love and the inner peace that you were searching for?
Yes, I have. As you mentioned earlier, I am, along with 3 other women, doing a podcast called God's Table Hollywood. That's the full name. And I'm not religious in the least. I don't go to church, but I am deeply spiritual. And that spirituality has brought me a peace and an understanding. I'm still single. I used to think that my only completeness would come from being with a man. And I think that is wonderful for people that believe that way and that live that way. But for me, that's not out of the question. But I believe that if I were to have another relationship, it would be bringing completeness to that relationship, not looking for it out of it. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. And I think that, at least I hope, that when you look at the constellation of love around you, that you do appreciate that there are millions of people all over the world who really love you.
So lovely. I receive fan mail from all over the world, and it just blows my mind. I'll get from China, from Russia, from England, from Poland, from Slovakia, and I think, how do they know me? And I think, I'm so grateful for all of it, and I do feel the love, and I just think you are an incredible interviewer, Harvey. I have to tell you, you do your homework. I've got goosebumps right now because you really do your homework.
Oh, thank you, Dyan. That means the world to me. Well, it's easy to do my homework. I've followed your career my whole life. It's been an incredible honor and privilege meeting you and having this opportunity to celebrate your incredible life, your career. Thank you for all the great performances. Thank you for writing your book. Thanks for all the joy, the inspiration, and healing that you've brought to millions of people all over the world. And most of all, thank you for taking the time to appear on our show.
I loved every minute of it. Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you so much. Our guest has been the legendary Dyan Cannon. Her fabulous book, which I highly recommend, Dear Cary, My Life with Carrie Grant, is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producers, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli of the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my editor, Isaiah Sharalampidis, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.